Hello, Bremer County and all of Iowa. This is Sean and Emily coming to you in our Deciding Iowa discussion, where we will give an update on legislative actions and consider the impacts locally and for everybody in our state.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Ellenbrook, and I'm a cancer scientist, biochem prof, school board member, and a former House District 57 candidate.
And I'm Dr. Emily Bavers. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, mother of three, and a reproductive freedom advocate. So, it's St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. I hope you've got your green on because that's kind of our topic today. Let's talk green. Let's talk some money here in Iowa. How's that sound?
That sounds great. And I think first up, we got to talk about property tax. House Study Bill 313 and Senate Study Bill 1208, as currently written, will make dramatic changes to Iowa's system of property taxes. If projections are correct, it will provide Iowans an estimated $426 million in savings across the state. That's a
Wow.
big number.
That is a big number. Where's that money coming from?
Well, we'll have to get to that. But to be clear, property taxes are very much a local tax. And these proposed changes, if they were enacted, would take up to 5 years to phase in. So let's get to a couple of big points about this property tax bill.
Yeah.
First, there's this property tax rollback system that's been around for, I guess 50 years or so.
Okay.
I heard initially they put it in place because of high inflation, but a bit more than 20 years ago, they did some significant rework because of soaring property valuations for residential houses. So what the property rollback system effectively means today is the state decides how much of your home's assessed value will actually be subjected to local property taxes. This past cycle, the rollback was set at 47%, meaning 40% of your residential home value was taxable. Now, there's some other things that go on with this property tax rollback on limits on budget and agricultural properties versus residential versus corporate properties, but the gist of it is it's a rollback.
Now, everybody likes a rollback, right?
Well,
everybody likes paying less in taxes.
Well, who doesn't like the rollback? The local, county and cities, because they have to budget around the rollback.
And we've really felt that here in Waverly, I will say.
We did. It's hard to predict what the rollback number will be. And for example, if the rollback is unexpectedly too aggressive, budget issues like Waverly's pool closure can happen. So what this new system will do is remove that rollback and will allow your entire home's value to be taxed. Now, before you get too concerned, they are going to do a couple things at least. One of them is offer everyone a $25,000 homestead exemption to lower your home's taxable value. And they're going to restrict local levy rates such that there's a maximum of 2% annual budget growth. I like the idea of city and counties not having to work around future rollbacks, Emily.
That's great.
Yeah, I think they're going to be able to more accurately predict what their next year's budget will be.
I know I've heard from people on our city council and, people in town that it's been really hard to know what's going to happen over the next couple of years and to plan infrastructure projects around that.
Absolutely true. Hey, and as I mentioned, this new system is expected to save Iowans over $400 million in property tax, which as a homeowner, I like.
Sure.
The how is a bit complicated. So first, the state plans to take away school districts' ability to tax through what is called an additional levy. Now, that in itself is going to make up most of the $400 million in property tax savings for you and me.
Question for you. What do schools use those levies for, though?
Well, they use it to educate our children.
Oh, shoot.
So second, the state will have to make up the difference through state foundation aid, which is a big term, but basically it means the state's going to have to use the state budget to backfill that missing revenue from additional levies.
I'm a little concerned about that, but go on.
Well, the state legislatures thinks that they can offset this increased expense by recouping property tax credits. Now that's a little complicated, but it looks plausible from what I can tell. But I'm a little concerned what that actually means for future city and county budgets. Remember, they're giving themselves about 5 years to get these changes done and for a while they can at least offset the state increase in budget towards the schools through the budget surplus,
Okay.
the one they've been touting.
Right.
And all this is very much under construction.
Okay.
And the numbers might change, the details might change. The state is getting input for schools, counties, and cities to make sure they try to get this right. Now, I'm glad to see the rollbacks go away. I do wonder about the many things I do not yet understand about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm concerned about the state taking on more responsibility for school funding with a looming state budget deficit.
Well, and with the changes that they've already made to school funding, I can't say that I 100% trust this all to go great.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. There's yeah, like a lot of legislative pieces. There's good and there's bad, and hopefully they can come to some understanding on what will work best for the city and the counties, the schools, as well as you, the property tax owners.
Yeah.
So we did mention a looming budget deficit, and
Right.
I think we need to go ahead and describe. So Emily, let's start with the fact that right now by 2026 they're looking at about $1 billion budget deficit for the state of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea why there's a budget deficit for the state of Iowa?
Is that because spending is greater than what they're bringing in taxes at this
That
point?
is generally the idea.
Okay.
But the question is, what are they spending it on?
Right.
I think you can look right now. There's a $350 million per year voucher program. Now that number right there is what they expect to have to pay for the voucher program in 2026.
Yeah, and that's so much higher than what the initial estimates were, right? Like
Exactly.
3 times.
And the thing about that is that's an open line item on the budget line, so they can grow to whatever it needs to grow. And it could just be, once again, a bigger number moving forward. So it's something to pay attention to. Another thing that's complicating matters and causing this budget deficit is, well, if your expenses go up, like with the voucher program and some other things, you have to look at the revenue side, and a 3.8% flat income tax. While that, impacts everybody, it's really disproportionately going to impact those that make the most money, and meaning that they're going to have to pay considerable less. And what that means in revenue, when you add in the corporate tax reductions, is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that the state of Iowa will not be collecting.
Mm-hmm.
And between that and the cost of the voucher program, what we're looking at is a $1 billion deficit come 2026, and that will just
Wow.
continue to grow.
Right.
Now, if you look at what we have in reserve, we have about a $4 billion taxpayer relief fund and another $2 billion in reserve funds. Now, Pat Grassley has gone on record as saying, quote, "We feel like we're in a very strong position to be able to still meet our requirements and our commitments through the budget process because we had such what I consider an overpayment of tax money from taxpayers." Now, there was some budget surplus that was being collected prior to COVID. But what happened is with COVID, a large amount of federal stimulus money entered the state.
Right.
And a lot of that money's been spent down, but there's still a good chunk left. Also, if you remember those stimulus checks you got,
Mm-hmm.
well, a lot of people spent those stimulus checks, and that resulted in a lot of sales tax receipts for the state of Iowa. In other words, they got an infusion of funds into their general fund, and as a result, they transferred it and created and grew what is known as a taxpayer relief fund.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the why we have this surplus, one is we're underfunding things like public schools, so not spending the same.
Right.
And the other is we've got a lot of one-time federal stimulus money sitting there.
Okay.
So when you look at the long-term ability to have a balanced budget, you have to acknowledge the fact that they're going to have to draw on this taxpayer relief fund, and eventually it will run out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to have to be some changes. And I think we need to spend some time looking at what might be coming down the road to try to balance the budget.
Right.
And when you look at then what can make up the balanced budget,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to first acknowledge we have some expenses. So when we look at what then will feed into the revenue side, I guess compared to the expenditure side moving forward, our current, as far as I can tell, for 2025, 55% of our state's income is coming from income tax, and that's
Okay.
both personal and corporate income tax. Like we said, that revenue is down because of the corporate tax rate changes as well as the flat tax, but 55%. There's other taxes that might come into play, and it doesn't really add up to near as much. One of the big players is sales tax. You're looking at about 38% of the state's revenue coming from that obligations because aside from that, we have the others and the fees. The fees would be things like your vehicle registration, your hunter's
Mm-hmm.
license.
Sure.
And the thing is Emily, is that income tax that they have right now, it doesn't look like it's going to change because they want to enshrine this flat
Right.
tax into the Constitution. So that's every bit of an indicator that we can't expect anything more from the income tax unless we grow our economy. And I've seen some rosy projections that the economy is going to go up, but this seems more of a trickle down economics approach of putting the savings into the corporate and the wealthy, and then that will
Exactly.
create jobs. So what could move? Well, there's not a lot of big resource pieces here. But we can expect to see some increases perhaps in our fees, so pay attention to what it's going to cost to get things done. Sales tax, that is a regressive tax. It certainly disproportionately hits some of the poor Iowans in our state. But for sure, keep an eye on increasing sales tax to try
Mm-hmm.
to offset budget deficits.
Right.
And then we got to pay attention to things like reducing services or reducing education. 2% is or 2.25 maybe on the SSA, which is basically our increased spending, when you consider things like inflation and things like that, are being the schools. And, that is not enough. That is not enough to give the teachers what they need. It's not enough to fund the programs. And right now, at 2%, over half of the school districts will be on something called budget guarantee, which translates into more property tax, trying to make up the difference. We got to keep our eye out for Medicaid, trying to
Right.
unenroll people off of Medicaid so that, and then the interesting thing about that is when you look to try to reduce Medicaid participation through, work requirements or things like that, it costs a lot more administratively
Right.
on an expense ledger side. So it's an interesting approach if that's the case.
Costs more administratively, but also costs the healthcare system a lot more too, in terms of, people having uncompensated care or not getting healthcare soon enough or having poor outcomes.
Absolutely true. And when you look at then the wild card on this, it's the federal government. With the feds, they are causing quite a bit of unrest. What we're seeing are tariffs. Tariffs are a big deal when you look at agriculture. Whether the price of potash goes up 10% or you can't find the proper external markets for soybean meal, it is going to affect our economy. And Iowa's economy is very tied into the agriculture industry.
Yeah.
$11 million in canceled USDA contracts for food that would have gone to agricultural partners. This is food for schools, childcare, food banks. There are things that are happening. We can go on here. The continuing resolution is looking for up to about $900 billion in budget cuts over 10 years, and apparently Medicaid might be on the chopping block.
I think a lot of that is going to hit healthcare and some of those safety nets that we have in place for when people really are in need.
Right. And if you look, they're already trying to adjust revenue projections for Iowa in 2025. Not really 2026, as clarity yet, but they are trying to project for that as well. and they're having to do these adjustments based on what is happening at the federal level, because so much that the feds do impact how much revenue we can expect to pull in as a state. Um, Looking at other things, there are other states that certainly have voucher systems. There are other states that have moved to a flat tax model. We've seen Kansas move to a flat tax model, and then later on get rid of it. They had a lot of loopholes in their tax system where people ended up not paying hardly any income or corporate tax. So they had their issues, but once again, when you look at this as a sustainable path going forward, it's hard to see how we're going to be able to meet the state's expenditure needs with a flat tax as compared to a progressive tax system, unless we really just hammer sales tax, which is a scary idea. And even then, I'm not real clear.
I
So
gotta say, Sean, I mean, on this chat, we've talked about several things that as a mom living in a small town in Iowa mean a lot to me. You know, I want the schools to be funded. I want people to have access to healthcare, and I want kids to have access to vaccines and well child visits. And the other thing that I want is I want the pool open. I want good infrastructure. I want the roads to be good and the sidewalks to be well cared for because I want to raise my family in this small town. A lot of this is really scary.
it's a very it's a very pivotal time. I
Yeah.
feel like we're at an inflection point in the history of the state and the country. So once again, everybody pay attention, and we'll come back and talk about some more things next week. But Emily, it's good to talk with you today.
Good to chat with you. Go have a green beer now.
All right.
Okay.
Be well, Iowa.
Bye.